I once heard a woman named Cindy Trim say, if you do not choose consciously and deliberately your own I ams, you will end up living at the mercy of other people's you ares. And, in that particular teaching that you're speaking about, one of the things I was speaking to is there a place in your life where you took on a story about who you are? And maybe you've never really questioned it, maybe because it came from parents or family, maybe because, you've heard it since childhood or from a young age, maybe because it was based out of this defining experience, maybe even trauma that you went through. But a lot of us take on a story about who we are and we never question it. We never examine it, but without realizing it, we're living into that story.
Welcome to the episode of the Believe the Hope podcast. I'm excited for this guest today because I'm here with Stefan Lovegrove, who is a guru in the space of hope and positivity. So I appreciate him being on. For those that know Stefan, he's internationally known as America's life coach and as a leading spiritual voice for the next generation. He has coached entrepreneurs, leaders, and celebrities in numerous fields for a decade, helping them transform their lives from the inside out. Experiences and as a TV personality on Hallmark, CNN, and many more, Stefan is an inspirational voice reminding people that all things are possible for the one who believes. Today, he speaks to people all over the world through a fresh spiritual teachings that anyone can access. He brings a unique form of energy, encouragement, motivation in the form of rave church experiences. And thank you for being on today. Thank you for sharing the message of hope, and love to learn and hear from you every time I've heard you speak or listen to one of your trainings the last couple of days. Always inspired, always feel like there's more hope in my life, and always feel like it's a positivity. So thank you for being on.
Well, I'm glad to be here. My favorite thing in the world is having conversations that change people's lives. So it is my prayer and intention that we would be able to do that today. I once had somebody in my community say, Stefan, I turn your stuff on when I need to feel Christmas morning energy. Now, that's a high bar to live up to, but we will try to bring some positivity, some encouragement, some Christmas morning energy today.
Like that's probably the best way that someone could describe when you listen to, because I feel the same way. I never could put it what it is, but I feel like you give that energy on a regular basis. So you're going to bring it today. First question I always ask, because everyone has different experiences, is what does hope mean to them personally?
Yeah, so I have thought about this question a lot, actually, in advance of this conversation. And I feel like I have a general definition for me and then a spiritual principle definition that I'll add into the mix as we get started here. So the general definition that I will say is hope to me is being able to see a future for yourself, believing in future. And I think that is so important because we are wired to be people of the future, people of vision, people who create. I know I've heard Erwin McManus talk about many times how one thing that sets human beings apart from so many other creatures that are on this planet with us is we actually have the capacity to see potential and see possibilities and see what can be. Now, of course, sometimes we overdo it and we need to be a little better at living in the present, but that really is something unique about human beings, right? Dolphins are not necessarily envisioning and building and creating a future as much as we might love them. Bees get a lot done, but they're not necessarily envisioning and like manifesting a future. So that's distinct to human beings. So my general definition would be, I think hope is the ability to see a future for yourself, for your life. And then because it's, this is just who I am, I'll throw in a spiritual principle here as well with my definition, because in a lot of the ancient texts that people are familiar with, when they use the word hope, the best way that we can describe the energy of what's really being used is waiting with a confident expectation of good. And so I wanted to bring that definition, that principle into the mix here, because I think that's a little more up level than just, we'll see what happens. There's one client of mine in particular, I won't say their name, but you know who you are if you're listening. And we always joke about the will see energy is not a very high vibration. It doesn't feel very good to just say, well, I guess we'll see what happens. So it's not a will see energy. I love that part of the definition, waiting with a confident expectation of good. So those are the two big ways that I think I look at it and approach it overall.
I love it. That's been, I love the spiritual context of that. How does one wait that expectation? Someone is lacking hope, or they're in a tough situation where they feel like nobody's listening, or they feel like, they're crying out to the universe or God and they're just not coming out of it, or they feel like, they're just spiraling out. How does one wait in that expectation to have more hope?
So I think there's a couple things here, because it depends on where somebody is at in their journey, and we could say on the energetic map. So to me, the opposite of hope, the antithesis of hope, is despair. And if somebody's in a place of despair, even, I'm not going to try to speak to this medically or clinically here, because I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, but even if we look at what is actually the definition of depression, right? I think a lot of people use that word, and we're all using the same word, but we mean a lot of different things when we say it. But one of the technical definitions of depression is when somebody cannot possibly imagine that things could ever change or get better or be different than they are today, right? So one part of my answer here is for the category of people that, if you're in a space of depression, if you're in a space, and again, I'm not trying to speak to it medically, but just the experience of, I'm having trouble believing that my life could ever change or get better. If you're in an experience of despair, if you are just feeling defeated overall, I think the place you have to start is just that starting point of hope that this is temporary. This is not permanent. The way I feel right now is not permanent. It's not always going to feel like this. It's not always going to be like this. I think until you get out of that despair zone, it's very difficult to build anything. And so, when it comes to this conversation, one thing I always think about, there's an author, Cheryl Strayed, and she wrote an advice column anonymously for years and years, and then they published it under her name. She was ready to reveal, it was me giving advice all along. So they published the book. It's called Tiny Beautiful Things. And there's an excerpt or a reading in that book where somebody writes in and they are grappling with addiction, and they know they need to go to rehab. They know they need to get help. They know they need to tell their family, et cetera, et cetera. But they're just in a very scared, overwhelmed place. And I've never forgotten something that Cheryl Strayed writes back to them, because she writes back and she says, "My dear, you do not have the luxury of despair right now. There is only one option. You can change your life, and you must." And I've thought about those words many times, because I think despair is a very dangerous place to hang out. I think it spirals very quickly, and it really is something that we should not just indulge in. There are feelings we need to feel. Sadness we might need to feel. Anger, in some instances, we really need to feel. There are things we need to feel. But despair is something I think we need to be discouraged or careful about, cautious about rather, because it does spiral very quickly. And the discouragement just builds and builds and builds. And so if somebody's in a place where we're fighting despair, I think being around people, with people, even having some people in your life who can be aware of that can check in on you, is really essential. But you've got to stay out of the despair zone. We've got to get out of the despair zone first and foremost. I think that's one category of the answer. Do you want to pause there? Do you want to go down any rabbit holes there?
Let's
do you want to
keep going?
Go to the
I
other
love
one?
it. I love it. Go to the other one. I love it. It's going well.
Okay. So the other piece I want to speak to is the category of people that are waiting on a specific thing. So they're not in an overall experience of despair or depression, but they're waiting on a very specific thing, waiting on something to manifest, waiting on something to show up, waiting on a vision, and it's taking a long time. And with that, I want to go back to that spiritual principle of waiting with a confident expectation of good. So if you're struggling with the waiting, I think the first place that I would look in that context is, what is your belief system and what is your expectation? What are you expecting down the line? And I think that's often an opportunity to really do some work to upgrade our beliefs and maybe even to really connect to our spiritual practice. But that's really where I would look for somebody who's believing for something specific, holding a vision, having trouble continuing to wait with patience or to believe. And I think the confident expectation of good part is where we really need to be solid. And that's probably the place I would say to do the work.
I love it. I love the context of being in despair and being just maybe in a, not so much in a despair place, but as an entrepreneur, there's oftentimes in my business where I'm in that waiting period and I don't like it. It's very frustrating. It's very almost feels lonely, but you're like, I'm not bad. Like, I know I can see the future. I know there's hope. I know things are going to come around, but it is that waiting part that it does get frustrating. It does get lonely at times. It does feel like that's the longest part. One of my mentors told me, he's like, that's where things are being prepared for you going forward. That's where the good things are happening. But you have to be able to listen in the waiting, to be able to see next steps, to be able to take care of those opportunities as they move forward.
And that's interesting. I think there's a really important piece here of, as much as it lies within your power and control to make these decisions, don't be miserable in the waiting as much as you can help it. Like, one thing that I often have encountered, and for context for people listening who are new to me, I've coached people for 10 years now. So, I'm not the longest running coach ever, but 10 years is a lot of clients, a lot of moments, a lot of conversations with people. One thing I've noticed is people will accidentally go on hold internally. Like, people will put their whole lives on hold, waiting for something to show up. And one of the things that makes waiting all the more agonizing in a way that it doesn't need to be is if you stop living in the meantime. Like, one of my favorite definitions of surrender I've ever heard is, surrender means no matter what, I'm going to keep living. I'm not going to stop everything. I'm not going to drop everything. I'm not going to pause everything and put it on hold until this thing gets worked out. Surrender means I trust enough that I'm going to keep living and I'm going to keep showing up no matter what, even if XYZ thing is not the way I want it to be, or I'm waiting on something. And again, I just think a huge piece that makes a big difference here is, don't be unnecessarily miserable in the waiting. So keep spending time with good people. Keep doing work that you love in a way that's meaningful to you. Keep pouring into people and serving others. Keep, as much as possible while you're waiting on one thing. Don't put everything else on hold and don't be unnecessarily miserable in the meantime. Because I think when you have a great quality of life and a great experience of your life and a peace and a joy and a contentment overall, don't get me wrong, we all still have moments where something is taking a lot longer than we want and we're impatient. We all have those moments. But at the same time, here's another spiritual principle. Patience produces the proof of every positive expectation. I really believe in this principle. Patience produces the proof of every positive expectation. So if we know that, we've got to find ways to build the patience into our lives. And if we actually have built a life that we love, if we, do things we love and enjoy and find meaning in on a daily basis, it's a lot easier to stay in the patient zone and keep moving forward even while we're waiting.
Beautiful. Beautiful. People are doing this. People are cultivating more hope. How are they able to spread that in their community? How would you suggest that they build more hope in their community and their surroundings, line, locally, etc.
Yeah, first of all, I love that this question is in here because something I often say sprinkled in near the end of some of my episodes is that I never want to be personal development content that is only ever you, and it's never anybody connected to you, your community, a world that's bigger than just you. I think it's always good to expand our perspective and to think about others. I actually, by the way, think it's a path out of despair for a lot of people is if looking at your own life in the moment only leads you to a sad or discouraged place. One of the best things, by the way, that I think you can do is really think about others. Find somebody else that you can love. Find somebody else that you can be an answer for. Find somebody else that you can support in some way. That's a fast track out of despair, I have often found. But anyway, love this question. And what I feel led to share here is earlier this year, I felt like there was a moment where God said to me, your number one job is just to speak life everywhere you go. And I really do believe in the principle that the power of life, or just so we don't trigger an algorithm, I'll say unlife, if you know what I mean, that power is in the tongue, that we have the power to create or to destroy with the words that we speak. And there's a very real, powerful component to that, an energetic component to that, a scientific component to that. But I heard this message earlier this year. Your number one job is to speak life wherever you go. And I'll just pass that on here because that's such a simple thing, but it goes such a long way. Even, I mean, this is not even really speaking life. This is just simple gratitude. But like, I will notice sometimes I will leave a workout, I'll leave a boutique fitness class, and 30 people will walk out of the classroom. And sometimes literally nobody will take a moment to just pause, make eye contact with the instructor and say, thank you. Thank you for that workout today. Thank you. Appreciate you. Sometimes nobody will out of a class of 30. And again, that's very, very little. I mean, that's starting line stuff here, just saying thank you. But, I'll use that example since I'm running with it now. Like, what about you walk in to the gym to do your workout and you take a moment to just encourage and smile at and speak something positive over the people at the front desk and to say, like, I appreciate you all. Thank you for doing what you do. You all are fantastic. And again, these are very little examples, but I think everybody could use more life spoken over them. I shared earlier with my community this year that if you look at the ancient schedule of Jewish prayers and Jewish rituals, if you did all of the prescribed things every day, you would have 100+ blessings spoken every single day, which is wild. I had somebody tell me they were listening to one of my affirmation tracks this year, and they said, Stefan, I don't think I've ever had somebody consciously speak a blessing over me. And that really hit me because I was thinking about, here somebody's telling me, I don't think anyone has ever spoken over my life in this way. And then I'm contrasting, in a different culture, in a different time, in a different setting, they had 100 blessings spoken every single day. So I think everybody could use more encouragement and life spoken over them. It doesn't have to be super complicated, super spiritual, super fancy, but I think that's a very simple thing we all can do is speak life wherever you go.
One thing that led to me, because you said something on this training I was listening to before we got on this afternoon. Shame is what was it? Guilt is what we have done. Shame is what the story someone else is giving us. And that a lot of people live in shame because, and you said, is that shame even real? Is that story even real? Do you feel that maybe that there is people go into that despair, or they feel like they can't share those blessings because they are living in shame? They are telling themselves a story that's not necessarily true, but that's what they've told themselves over their life.
Yeah, well, I once heard a woman named Cindy Trim say, if you do not choose consciously and deliberately your own I ams, you will end up living at the mercy of other people's you ares. And, in that particular teaching that you're speaking about, one of the things I was speaking to is there a place in your life where you took on a story about who you are? And maybe you've never really questioned it, maybe because it came from parents or family, maybe because, you've heard it since childhood or from a young age, maybe because it was based out of this defining experience, maybe even trauma that you went through. But a lot of us take on a story about who we are and we never question it, we never examine it, but without realizing it, we're living into that. And so I am very passionate about people getting curious about who they really are and letting go of the stories that maybe have been passed down to them, forced on them, whatever the case may be, but letting go of the stories that in many cases they didn't even realize they took on, that don't serve them, aren't relevant anymore, and don't have to be calling the shots.
Coach, like you said, the last 10 years, variety of different clients, CEOs, entrepreneurs, etc., just other everyday people. What are you helping them find hope-wise when they're lacking hope? What are you teaching them specifically when they're lacking hope?
I think a lot of the work that I do is reminders and reconnection. So, especially I will say with clients, one of the benefits of working with somebody over a prolonged period of time is they know who you are. They know how powerful you really are. They know your greatness, your capability. Essentially, they know who you are, even when you have forgotten or lost sight of it, or you're not really feeling powerful or like yourself in the moment. So I think a lot of the work ends up being bringing people back to the truth of who they are, reminding them of that, still seeing them in their highest and best, even in the moments where they don't see it. And then I think also reconnection, because a lot of times where people have temporarily lost hope, there has been a disconnection. Could be a disconnection from God or whatever their experience is spiritually, could be a disconnection from their purpose, their calling, what they're really here to do. And, a lot of times we have to make that reconnection. Like there's a lot of things that might temporarily shift a mood or temporarily make somebody feel better. But the truth is we're all living from the inside out. And if we're disconnected on a soul level, that's going to keep catching up with us. That's going to keep asking for our attention and asking to be resolved. So ultimately, I think it's a lot of those two things, a lot of reminding people of the deepest truth about who they are, and a lot of helping people reconnect again and again and again.
Love the reconnection aspect, whether spiritually or just in their own world of what they're doing in the world, if they're doing something meaningful, because if you have a meaningful community, if you have a meaningful purpose in life, you're doing something that you enjoy. I think that goes a very long way to connect. Personally, I think I've connected recently just with my faith more, and that's made a big difference. My community and my church and everything. And that sometimes when things aren't going well or you're having a rough week, just that hour or whatever with those people or with that connection can make all the difference in the world and help ground you a little bit. Or just in your coaching with somebody, have a mentor or a coach or someone that you can lean on a regular basis.
Yeah, two things that I will share here. One, I'll just share this from my own personal experience and belief system here, but to me, it just makes sense. And I understand not everybody operates from this framework, but to me, it just makes sense. If God is the source of all that is, then if I want something to change in my receiving, the place to begin is connecting or reconnecting to my source. And again, everybody is welcome here, regardless of what their spirituality or belief system is. But for me, that is a very logical flow. And it astounds me how many people will feel like something is off, something is out of alignment, something is not working. And they may even be people that would agree with the idea that God is the source, of course, yes, whatever. but they never consider, there could be guidance for me there. There could be direction for me there. There could be support for me there. So that's a huge piece of it, I think. And I'm very passionate about that principle, that one truth. I even did an entire audio track, not about many beliefs, but all about the one principle and truth that God is the source, because I just felt that so many people weren't really getting it on a deep level. So that's the first thing I wanted to share. The second thing is about purpose. I was just speaking with someone about this yesterday. When you are a person who is running a business or leading people or creating something from a place of purpose, I'm not saying one is right or wrong, better or worse from each other, but you must understand that inherently is a different experience than just somebody making money or building wealth. And I want to be very clear. I am all for making money. I am all for building wealth and being a great steward of it. And I believe God wants us to prosper and et cetera, et cetera. I could talk about that all day. I have talked about it in many teachings. So I'm all for building wealth. But let's be very clear. If you are a person who what you do is driven by a sense of purpose or calling, that's just a different category discussion than somebody whose only metric is, am I building wealth? And so I was telling someone just yesterday, I think, there's a lot of content out there that may even have validity to it about you could do this to make money. You could do this to build wealth. What about this business idea? What about this revenue stream? What about this thing that everybody's doing right now? And I was sharing, if your only filter is I just want to make money wherever it is, I don't care, doesn't matter, I just want money, then truthfully, there are infinite pathways and you can do whatever you want and go wild with it all. But if you're a person who has identified, I think this is the contribution I'm supposed to be making to the world, or I think this is my zone of genius, or I think this is my message or my purpose or my assignment. Again, I am not saying this with any judgment, and I'm not saying one is better or worse, but it's a different conversation. And a lot of the advice and a lot of the guidance and a lot of the paradigms out there, we just got to understand, won't perfectly apply to somebody who is operating from a purpose place if they're coming from a paradigm of money, no matter what, all that matters is money. I think understanding that distinction is really important. I'm not saying everybody listening to this has to be a purpose person, but I think if you are listening, there's a good chance that you are wired that way. And if you are, just know the conversation is different.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, there's so many good thoughts just on my end for that. I am to receive that message right there. I don't know if I hope all the listeners have received that message, but the purpose of this podcast, I felt driven to do it, and I neglected myself. I kept telling myself I wasn't ready, I wasn't qualified, nobody wanted to listen to it, no one, but I just kept being, when something just pokes you, it's like the little kid and your little brother in the back, like, I'm not touching you the whole time, that, yeah, that's being done to you. That's where I felt this was going, just to even start this. So thank you for that message, because I just needed to receive that today. So I appreciate that.
Well, I'm glad, and please receive it. And, celebrate you. I acknowledge you. I honor you for listening to that and answering the call, because the truth is the purpose voice is not going to go away. And I just told a client this the other day. You can build something that's like a shiny object if you want, right? You have free will. You can do that. You can build something that's a distraction. You can build something that is coming from unmet need or an ego place or a wounded part of you that has something to prove. And so you can do all of that, and you can delay your true purpose, your true work, your true calling for as long as you want. You have free will. But understand, the purpose voice is not going to stop talking to you. It is going to keep circling back around. So at a certain point, I think we all reach a point where we say, I guess I should listen. I guess I should take this seriously because it just won't leave me alone and it keeps popping up again and again. And so I do feel like maybe this is an important message for anybody out there who has been putting off the real dream or the real work or the real message. I understand there are many, many, many things we can be doing. And like I said, infinite ways to make money, etc. But the purpose voice is there for a reason and it is not going to go away.
Well, I want you to keep going with these insights. So, are there any other things that you'd like to add that we didn't ask about or talk about yet regarding hope, positivity?
I think I just feel called to share this thought for anybody who has not been feeling inspired or feeling great or feeling like themselves lately. Sometimes we have to act a new way, try something new, make a new decision before we feel it, even while we don't feel it, in order to feel something new. And, I have been in seasons of life before where I felt like I was stuck in a rut. And the temptation in those seasons is to just keep waiting. Either, number one, sometimes we're waiting for something with, I like to call it a lottery energy. Like when we feel disempowered, when we can't see any possibility for change, when we don't know how we would change anything, we start, our brain starts thinking lottery solutions. So, like, what drastic thing could just come out of nowhere and change everything and fix my whole life? And that's not an empowered place to be. We don't want lottery daydreaming, not literally about the lottery, though it could be that. But we don't want lottery solutions. It's not the most empowered place in our brain. And also, I think there's the temptation just to keep waiting for it to feel different. And like when I feel better, when I feel momentum again, when I feel inspired again, when I feel creative again, when I feel like myself again. And it is so easy to get stuck in a rut where we keep waiting for the feelings to change and we don't feel something different. And so one of the things I'm so passionate about is if you are in a place not feeling great, not feeling like yourself, it is your, self-loving decision that you can make to interrupt that pattern, to interrupt that cycle, to interrupt that experience. And I did a recent teaching where I was talking through just simple things people can do. But putting everything on do not disturb and getting still and spending a little bit of time with God every day is a great way to interrupt it. Going to the gym, working out, moving your body, especially in a high intensity way that really gets things moving. That is a powerful way to reset what you're feeling on the inside. Plugging into some inspirational content, like even this, episode that you're listening to right now. One of the things I like to say is, for the moments that I don't feel it, I'll borrow your feelings. And for the moments that I don't believe it, I'll borrow your belief. And so those are just three very simple things that people can do. But I want people to realize sometimes you're going to have to interrupt the experience before you feel it. And I want you to know the feeling is temporary. The feeling is not permanent. It's not always going to feel like this. But one of the worst states that I think we can remain in is just sitting around in a bad state, hoping that it eventually gets better. Whatever you can find within yourself or using your support system to do to interrupt that pattern and to do something different even when you're not feeling it. I think that's such a powerful and, again, self-loving choice that you can make that makes a world of difference.
Perfect. So how can others connect with you so they can feel like Christmas morning every single day and have this energy, have this interruption that you need to live with more hope and purpose and, all the good things in life?
Yeah, well, the easiest place to get connected is a little website that I have, which is Lovegrove Club. So it's my last name, LOVEGROVE.club. I put out a variety of stuff on different platforms. We do teachings on YouTube. We do content on the podcast. I do musical, inspirational experiences called Rave Church. So there's a lot of different things. But if we get connected there, I will send you everything that I am sharing, all the teachings, all the episodes, all the Rave Church, and all the other good stuff. So lovegrove.club. And when you go there, You can sign up. It's free. It's easy. But once you do, I will send you my favorite teaching of all time that I've ever done right away as a free gift. So if you're resonating with this conversation and you want to go deeper, that is a perfect place to start. And I would love to share that teaching with you.
Awesome. Highly recommend it. Highly recommend and tapping into anything Stefan does. I was super inspired by having this episode. And that's the beauty of doing these episodes, is talking to different people from different backgrounds and different experiences and learning from them. And when there's some days where maybe you don't have a lot of hope, this brings me hope. So yeah, I hope not only my listeners get more hope, but I always get more hope just with having these conversations. So thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedule and being here today. I greatly appreciate you, your message, and sharing this message of hope to the world.
Thank you for doing this. The world definitely needs hope right now, and you are a part of bringing it. So thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you.